from Wine Country, everyone. This is Mark Blanchard with the Blanchard Family Wines with another episode of Decanted, the talk show where we open up the conversation. And I think we're going to have a really interesting and deep conversation today because I have an incredibly interesting guest with us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Tad Lunden, who is the project manager for the Eastern Congo Initiative, which is a nonprofit founded by Whitney Williams and Ben Affleck. They aim to bring health, education, and prosperity to the Congolese people. And Tad also just so happens to be my brother-in-law. So, Tad, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking some time with me. How you doing?
No, Mark, I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I think I might be better known as your brother-in-law than for my profession. So I think that says a lot about how many people you get to talk to every day. So I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk in depth with you also.
I am honored to be your brother-in-law. So of course, my wife, Kaylee, is your brother. And when I started the concept of this show, you were on a short list of some of the most interesting people I know. And the idea behind the show is to really have interesting conversations with interesting people. And we're going to dig into this a lot here today and talk about, your interesting career and this amazing nonprofit that you work for, again, the Eastern Congo Initiative. But first things first is we are going to drink some wine together here.
Perfect.
So you got your glass in front of you here?
I do.
So the first wine we're going to try is the Sparrow Alice white wine, which is a new wine in my portfolio, inaugural vintage, a wine named for my 4-month-old daughter, Sparrow Alice, the first biological daughter in the Blanchard family bloodline in over 150 years. So excited about introducing this wine in the world, and obviously very blessed to have this beautiful daughter. And she is just a couple months younger than your firstborn.
Yeah, one month to the day.
That what it
actually.
is.
So we just got it in right before you guys. So,
and of course, Tad's firstborn, his son Huck. And how is Huck doing?
Huck's doing well. We've been so fortunate. He's just such an easy baby that we don't even like to really talk about it too much because we just know the other shoe is going to drop. But
and you're going to make other parents bitter because, not all of us have easy babies.
You might not have the easiest baby, but I've seen your baby and it's the cutest. So I think that's where it sometimes, evens out a little bit.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I would say it has been a huge transition. And as you know, but the people watching don't, this was our first baby. And actually, because of COVID, it was the first time that we really had the chance to even think about starting our family, which is kind of a crazy thing. But just because we've been both traveling so much, my wife and I, for work, and then living overseas in areas where there's not as, good of healthcare and things like that, particularly if pregnancies get complicated. And then also it creates all kinds of logistical hurdles for us for what the future is going to hold. But we're super excited, and it's like the best type of complication you can have in your life.
Right. I mean, I'm a silver lining guy, and if the silver lining to your pandemic life was getting stuck at home and having your first child, that's a nice silver lining.
No, it's one that I feel incredibly fortunate to say, because I'm not trying to, also, I don't want to downplay the seriousness of everything that happened, but I do think that, in life, you just have to find the silver linings. And even when you're faced with, an overall very crummy situation, you always have the choice for optimism and seeing what you can be grateful for. So
yeah,
Huck is definitely that for us.
Oh, by the way, what do you think of the Sparrow Alice so far?
I think worthy of its namesake. It seems cute, young, fresh.
Yes, good,
just like Sparrow.
Good.
No, it's really good.
I love it. Well, let's get into the conversation here. Again, Decanted. It's all about opening it up. So I want you to really enlighten our viewers on what the Eastern Congo Initiative is all about, and a little bit specifically of what you do. I mean, what's your job?
Yeah, that's a good question. One that it changes every day. which
I'll
is
bet.
part of the reason that I really enjoy my work. The Eastern Congo Initiative has been around for 10 years. And throughout that time, it's had one underlying purpose, and that has been really to elevate Congolese voices and Congolese solutions to the problems that are facing Congo. And so maybe I'll just give a little bit of background, because I know you know this as we've talked about it, but for other people that maybe are a little bit less familiar with Congo. So the Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the largest countries in landmass in Africa. And it's got about 84 million people, between 84 and 88 million people that live in it. But for everyone that's in the US, if you think about it's everything that is east of the Mississippi River.
Wow.
That's how big it is in terms of landmass.
Wow.
But then, so I'm currently living in Minneapolis, and the city of Minneapolis itself has more miles of paved road than all of Congo. Wow. And so it's a really big country. But it's got, it's really had a lot of underinvestment in terms of infrastructure throughout the years. And that really started, going back a little bit, about a century and a half, when it became a colony of Belgium. And actually, unlike other colonies, the entire country of Congo was the personal property of the King of Belgium. And so he essentially treated all that country as if it were his personal slave plantation. And so the roots of that are really still relevant today. So even at the time of independence, which was in 1962, there was so much underinvestment in the Congolese people that only 6 people had ever gone to university within the entire country.
The entire country.
And
wow.
Yeah,
I mean, that's astounding.
And the highest ranks that people could reach within the colonial administration, one was assistant postmaster, and another one was the sergeant, the highest level of non-commissioned officer. And so the postmaster actually went on to be the first democratically elected president, Patrice Lumumba. And he was assassinated in a coup, which was facilitated by the Belgians and by the US during the Cold War, and was replaced by that NCO, who then became the dictator for about 50 years, so up until 1994. And so then the last thing, and then I'll kind of stop talking so much. Sorry, this is like becoming a monologue. And not,
no, this is incredibly fascinating. Please go on.
But so what happened, and most people have heard about what's happened in Rwanda and the awful genocide that happened there, where within a little bit under 100 days, 800,000 people were massacred. And so as the force that was kicking the genocidaires, which is the people committing the genocide, came into Rwanda, then everybody that was within the ethnic clan that had been committing the genocide fled into Congo. And they went, and it was a huge humanitarian crisis, because it was people that had been in that clan that had nothing to do with the genocide, mixed in with people that did have things to do with the genocide. And so it was really hard from a humanitarian perspective to tell, okay, who was kind of, someone that had done these horrible atrocities versus someone that just happened to have been born in that clan. And so that large exodus of people into Congo actually started off what's called the Great African War. And so it was a war that lasted from 1994 up until 2014. And it's the deadliest conflict since World War II. And so estimates range between 4 on the low side up to 14 million people died in that conflict. And it involved 7 different countries in the region, but it was mainly fought in this area of Eastern Congo. And so within that time period too, there was a lot of things like humanitarian aid that flew into the country and was kind of really providing this kind of short-term, life-saving, very noble, very worthwhile enterprises, or initiatives. But then when you have that for over 20 years, then that very aid that's trying to help people can actually start really eroding their own agency and their own systems or infrastructure that was there to actually take control and be an active participant in their own development in their own life, really. And so our goal as ECI is really to try and reverse that paradigm and to find different ways of saying, okay, no matter how much the international community cares about atrocities and things like this, which, there are people that care a lot about this, we'll never care about it nearly as much as all of the people in Congo that are facing these problems every day.
Yeah.
And so rather than saying, oh, what is the solution that we should be bringing to these people? Like, why do we think that we know? What we should really be doing is like working with the Congolese people and that are facing these problems, the mothers, the fathers, everybody that are there, and say, okay, what do you really see as being the answer to these problems? And so that's what we do as an organization, is work in Congo to help find what people think some of those solutions are, and then help them get some attention brought into it, and then help them eventually kind of scale that up into a larger solution or program or initiative or business. It really runs the gamut. And so the follow-up to that, sorry, this is the last one that I'll be so long-winded. But my role within that is that, so I'm the product manager. And so we've got kind of four really main products and services that we offer to the Congolese community. And my job is to really look at what is the value proposition of that. So kind of who is the client, how well are we serving them? And working with my team in Congo to see, okay, what are kind of the different iterations that we can do to better serve that client community? And so that goes across grant making. And so we give out grants directly to local organizations, which most people, that hasn't really been done before. We're kind of one of the leaders in that, to find these local nonprofits and then fund them directly. And then we also run a suite of social enterprises. So a social enterprise is a business that's got a social purpose. And so right now we sell clean water and provide healthcare on a fee-for-service basis to about 120,000 people every day.
Amazing. Oh, there's your dog.
There's my dog. And then the third one is that we call it building markets. And so there's all of these great commodities, particularly farming goods, that are in Congo, like coffee and cocoa. And we help those farmers find an international market for their goods. And so we work with Starbucks and Nespresso and Theo's Chocolates, as well as a bunch of smaller companies as well, to try and find a market for those Congolese goods. And then the last one is advocacy. And that's essentially, we try and really vis-a-vis our co-founder, Ben, shine a spotlight on what's happening in Congo and show that a lot of the narrative that people assume doesn't tell the full story that exists there. So sorry that took so long, but that's what I do in a nutshell.
That was amazing. Thank you for sharing that information. And so, I mean, obviously I did research on the company, and you and I have had conversations. Those of you that are watching this, Tad was recently interviewed by Forbes magazine. The interview was just brilliant. And one of the things that struck me the most in that interview and research and conversation we had is this sort of mentality of you're not going there with this idea of, oh, we know best, listen to us, so much as listening to them. Like, you might have, the Congolese people know better the solutions, and you're there to advocate those solutions. And I found that really profound.
Yeah, no, and I think that's just it, right? Is that we, and my background is in management consulting. And so within that, right, like, it really taught me a lot. And that's that, we'd work with these big companies and things like that. And we'd be flown out and you'd go and you'd talk to a lot of the people in the company, and then you'd go present it to the C-suite and say, oh, this is what you should do. Like in that case too, all we really did was listen to everybody in the company, help them kind of articulate that a little bit, and then show what that everybody in the company's vision was to the management or the executive team.
Yeah.
And so that was really early on for me, like this light bulb, like, oh, all these people that think they know all this much, like the people that are actually there every day are thinking about this way harder and way longer than I am.
Yeah.
And so, that's really where what the basis of what we do is really looking at, okay, what are the solutions that are there and what are the things that people are seeing? Because I think one of the things that is particularly going to be true about this century is that proximity to your customer, proximity to a problem is going to be the thing that really defines the solutions, right? And so before in the 20th century, it's all about, okay, how do we have, a big factory and machining facility that can reach scale and do something by being really, really big. And I think what we've seen is that, particularly with a lot of the new forms of interaction with digital and all of that, is that we then see that there's this much bigger possibility to amplify more disparate and diffuse and decentralized approaches to problems that then will slowly start to scale on their own.
Yeah, no, I love it. I feel like, when I was a kid, and I mean, you'll remember this, there was, you see the commercials of like, for the price of a cup of coffee a day, you could feed a kid in Africa. And I think we all learned that a lot of those charities ended up not being as noble as we thought they were. And I feel like there's a very different philosophy that ECI has, and a lot of other kind of more modern nonprofits, that there's a very different philosophy on how to tackle the problem.
Yeah, no, and I think I actually went to school and studied international development economics, really thinking that I would want to go work in a nonprofit. And when I'd studied it, it's exactly what you're describing is what I saw, was that just so often, despite how good the intentions of people, particularly people, that are giving that cup of coffee a day or that money, that's such a noble, pure intention. But then the structures weren't really in place to be accountable to the person that needs that food. And so I think that was one of the really big light bulbs for me. Was it's so vital to see what are the ways that I can work to make myself not accountable just to a donor who's in the US or in Washington, DC or whatever, but how do I find ways that I'm actually accountable to the person that needs that service? Yeah. So that person that needs clean water or needs healthcare, that's what's really important.
That's amazing. So, well, let's shift to the second wine, actually. So don't pour more Sparrow out. Well, you pour some more.
I'm gonna just one last little. It's too good to pass up. One more.
And we'll move on. Again, now I love talking to you about this kind of stuff because your insight is just so profound and interesting. What you do is, again, really, really fascinating. So let's try a little of the Cash Allen Cab here, because I've.
All right.
We're going to shift the conversation a little bit. So this is our 2017 Cash Allen Cabernet. In fact, so all three wines you're trying are wines named after kids. You tried the Sparrow Alice name for my daughter, of course, as I explained. Cash Allen is my 12-year-old nephew. So this is the wine for my 12-year-old nephew, one of my favorite wines, the Cash Allen Cab. So
cheers.
So I want to ask you a few questions about, we got a little overview on what your nonprofit does and what you do. But I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. And so I have two questions for you here. The first question is, what was, and both of them have to do with surprises. So what was your biggest surprise challenge? And what was your biggest pleasant surprise when you entered into this, not just the nonprofit of ECI, but just this world, this nonprofit world, and this world of helping people in Africa. So first on, what was one of the biggest challenges? Was it the travel, language barrier, the bureaucracy? On like, what was one of your most surprising, unexpected challenges?
Well,
I feel like you probably had a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to, it's like, I've got an embarrassment of challenges, as they say. But no, one of them that really caught us off guard and caught a lot of people off guard was COVID. And so, yeah, so me and my wife, Carly, had just moved to Rwanda in January of 2020 after being back in the States for a little bit and really splitting our time between here and there. We're like, okay, we're going to live there and be there full time. And then in March, the first week of March, then had to we even brought our dog.
You had a house and a dog and everything.
Yeah, we were like set up to like live there long term.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened. And so we found out 2 days before the last international flights were closing, are going to be out of the country for, we didn't know how long. And so we had to make the very difficult decision to go back to the States to be close to family. And the real kicker on that was that we had to leave our dog behind. And so then it became like the best cared for dog that had like the most like embarrassingly nice life during the time that we were gone. And then it's a rescue dog, and that became like the most expensive dog ever because we ended up shipping it home as cargo, which is a whole nother story. But I think, that's a challenge that a lot of people face. I think if one of the things that really surprised me, though, I think just more generally about the work is that, and we touched on it a little bit just a moment ago, but we talk a lot about this idea, at least in philanthropy, about this idea of compassion fatigue, right? Mm-hmm. That people end up getting so tired of donating or of being involved in something philanthropic. But I've really found that to not be the case. And what I think is surprising about that is that, or the challenge within it, is that we as an industry, or we as nonprofits, and we as the people that are actually overseas doing this work or supporting people overseas doing this work, really need to step up our game and kind of change our business models around how we help serve people. And so that's been one that's been really tough, because I think that that's something that's really ingrained within the way that U.S. government funding works, and kind of all the bureaucracy around that is really, it's really challenging and really boring to work on, actually, right? And so it's like, how do you help convince people to change something when they're kind of one small part that really wants to change it, but they're within a whole huge bureaucracy or a whole huge system. And so within that, we kind of have this strategy, which we call Finding Fred, which comes out of this book about someone that was facing a business model challenge with their customers, and one person within their organization was kind of like really blocking them. And so they found that person, then flipped it on their head to be like, how do we make this person be our biggest star? And so we get a lot of our money from the US government, and we're trying to, in some ways, we're kind of like poking a bear by saying like, okay, you guys who have been doing this for so long are doing it in this way that isn't ennobling people as much. And so, that's something I truly believe is true, but it's also kind of offensive, right? And like not the way that you want to go about treating your client and customer. And so the challenge to this, I guess, is that we had this person that was very high up, very senior within the government, and they'd been doing this work for over 40 years and really down into kind of this technocratic, the people that are the experts in this know best. Let's leave it to them. We've got these tried and true approaches, blah, blah, blah. And what you guys are doing, it's kind of interesting, but it will never have the chance to actually scale across the entire country. And therefore it's not worth our time, which is ultimately something that I can kind of appreciate. And, she's got they had a huge mandate, and it was really one about how do I grow this approach over time, and how do I grow impact across an entire country that's everything besides the east of Mississippi, right? And so I could appreciate that. But what we always came back with is this idea that when you think about scale, that can be in contrast to substance. And so one of the things that we really wanted to do is say, okay, how are we going to have a very substantive impact on the ground? And how are we going to be, rather than going really wide, how are we going to go really deep within these communities? Which means that, we have to put scale aside for the moment and really think about that. How are we serving these communities in particular? Because they've got different needs in the communities that are 10 kilometers away. And those communities have needs that are different than the ones 30 kilometers away from them. What we ended up doing, which is kind of funny, is that this person ended up leaving their post and transitioning on to the next assignment. And so they're going to be leaving Congo. And there had been a little bit of an adversarial relationship, but we ended up throwing them a big going away party, and wanted to really recognize all that they had done, because they had done an amazing work. And even though they didn't support us as much, they still had been such an advocate for Congo. And that's what we're all about, is who are the people that love Congo? Let's love them. And so, this person, is a very serious diplomat. And but they were a big fan of this one musician, and so we found this cloth that's kind of like the Elvis of Congo, and so it had Papa Wemba, and his face was all over this thing, and so we had a little pantsuit made up for them, and so and presented it to them as a gift, and had a night of dancing and just thanking them, and they were so touched by that. And then actually my wife, Carly, traveled to where their next posting was and went and visited them just to say hi, because we'd known them for a while. And the one thing that they had in their office was the mug that had our logo on it and all of that. Because it was the thing that we had been advocating for, recognizing someone as an individual and trying to really serve them and their unique needs. We took that and applied that to the bureaucracy, and that kind of made that transformational moment. And so that's one of the things that's really challenging to me, is that it is a big push, and the systems and structures can be against making what I call disproportionate impact. But that doesn't mean that you can't kind of chip away at that slowly. Yeah. And particularly by actually recognizing even the people that are in that bureaucracy that I think is kind of slow are human, and they have the same needs and wants and desires that I do, right? And I think that's the thing that has been most surprising to me is just that no matter what circumstance someone is in, we're actually pretty simple beings. Yeah. And the fact that we all have relatively uniform needs and desires, and the way we approach those, and we have unique gifts to offer, but our biggest driver is to share those unique gifts.
Yeah, I love that. And by the way, we're going to move on to the Marcel Blue in a second, but did you have moments of that kind of going along with what you're saying here, this realization? I feel like the average American would think that the Congolese people are just so kind of different and foreign. I mean, they're like aliens to us, just like we're like aliens to them in our differences. But have in all your interactions, were there a lot of moments of just realizing like people are people and families are families? And
yeah, no, 1,000%. Yeah, so a couple things that illustrate that is that, well, first of all, you can't live in a place, or I would challenge anybody to live in a place, no matter how different the culture is from your own culture, for a long enough period of time, and not just feel like, oh my gosh, there's just as many beautiful people here as there are annoying people as well. Right? Like, it's kind of both.
That's a great perspective.
And like, I would love to say that it's only beautiful, but it's not, right? There's also annoying things. But one of the things that we do is this process called human-centered design. And so what you do is you really spend a lot of time with individuals talking about the problems that they're facing, but not so much in a technical way, as more of like, what does it mean to actually live through that experience? And so two quick stories that I'll tell about it is that both related to, we sell clean water. And the first one was that as we were talking to people, particularly our kind of key customer demographic is mothers. Because much like in the United States, mothers take on a huge amount of the household work, and a lot, like, ultimately the buck stops there, right? Yeah. And so we're like, okay, if we can convince the moms to buy this clean water, then we're going to be set. And one of the things is that cholera is this awful disease that ends up, when you don't have clean water, it spreads very, very easily. And it ends up claiming a lot of lives through dehydration, particularly of children. And so I knew that, knowing like things about public health and international development. But the thing that I'd never really thought about, and this is what I learned in speaking with these women, they're like, oh my gosh, cholera is the worst. And they're like, well, yeah, because it kills people. And they're like, well, yeah, but it doesn't kill that many people. But the amount of vomit that you have to clean up, and diarrhea, and there's no washing machines around, right? And so like, you're like, oh yeah, cholera, it's awful. I'm not trying to downplay it. It does end up, claiming like 3 to 4% of the people that will get it, that have it very severely. But the thing that we downplay is like, oh yeah, there's just all these things that are like very inconvenient about these development challenges. And so like malaria is another one where oftentimes, when someone comes and imports a message, it's all about, oh, you need to sleep under a bed net because mosquitoes will kill you. And like, it's like, have you ever heard of marketing? Come on. Like, all we need to do is say like, you've never slept better than when you don't have mosquitoes biting you.
Right?
Because it's like the exact same needs and wants. Like, I don't want to think about death when I go to bed. That's scary enough already.
I would say these are things that any parent can relate to, not wanting to clean up after a sick child, not wanting to be bit by bugs when we go to sleep. I mean, these are
like, it's the exact same needs that we have, right? And so and to just further illustrate that is, we sell clean water. And so we really came at it originally with this idea of, okay, we'll talk about how good it is to drink clean water and all of the health benefits and all of that. And when we actually switched our messaging to then talk about how convenient it was for where we were located, and the fact that we were on all of the time, and that people didn't have to walk down to these rivers or to these other, unregulated sources to collect it, that's when we actually saw a spike in sales. And I think about it too, like, any of the 30 medications that are on TV, they don't actually really talk about the disease, right? They talk about the lifestyle that you get when you don't have to confront the disease. And so why would we think that people living in Congo would have any different psychology than we do? It's that level of uniformity, or that level of shared experience and shared perspective that we all have, the inputs are a little bit different, and therefore the outputs are a little bit different. But the process of the way that we kind of think about things is remarkably similar.
I love that. I love that. So let's move on to wine number 3 here, and conversation number 3. And this, I mean, all a flowing conversation here, but we're going to try some Marcel Bleu. So wine number 3 is a wine named after my 2.5-year-old son, Marcel Bleu. He loves his Uncle Tad. He's a big fan.
We just FaceTimed last night. So you're not the only Blanchard I FaceTime with.
Right. I was saying my son interviewed you last night on FaceTime.
That's right.
You on Zoom. He's taking.
I will say this interview is a lot less truck centric.
Oh, my son is really into trucks. Yeah, his questions all would have been, Uncle Tad, what is your favorite truck?
Yeah.
Although my son at 2.5 years old does actually have some pretty serious opinions on the state of the Congolese people and international politics, and he's got his opinions.
Oh yeah, no. It's always broached via trucks, but then it gets deep very quickly thereafter.
His theory is all the problems would be solved in Africa with more backhoe loaders.
Right.
That is his particular philosophy right now. But so I want to shift the conversation a little bit, and obviously, we're staying on, the story of the Eastern Congo Initiative. But you're the co-founder of your company. It's Whitney Williams and, of course, Ben Affleck. So you have a very high-profile celebrity founder and face of the company, which I feel like has its benefits and probably also challenges. You personally worked with a Nobel Prize winner. You've worked with Bill Gates. You've worked with some very high-profile people in trying to raise money and trying to accomplish your goals. For you, how as the non-celebrity now, again, to my son, Uncle Tad's a celebrity, but is the non-celebrity a representation of ECI? How important do you think it is to have a celebrity presence as the face? What role does that play in a positive? Is there a negative? Like, how important is it to have someone like Ben Affleck as the face of your company?
Yeah, so I think you know this, but not everyone else does. But I've been working in Congo since 2014. But then I only started working for ECI in 2018. And all of the time that I was working in Congo, I knew ECI, but the work that was being done there. And so I was really looking forward to starting to work for ECI. And to be completely honest, I was kind of thinking like, oh, okay, yeah, they've got this movie star dude, and he's like, whatever, doing the PR thing, and take him and you wheel him out when you're throwing like a gala or some fundraiser event.
That's probably what the average American would think. It's all PR, it's all an image, it's all an act. There's no way he's actually involved. He just puts his name on it. Is that all a misconception?
Well, and so my bias is that probably for a lot of other cases, I would think maybe that's it. But what I can say is that we went on a trip, Ben and I went on a trip as I was considering taking the job and kind of making the switch. And so then I was pretty astounded that he was like schooling me on Congolese politics. And,
you're thinking I'm the expert, Ben.
I'm like, no, I know this. I got this.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about this.
School you. Yeah.
And then he's like, well, no, it's really like this. I'm like, oh, you're right. But no, so I think the background of it is that, he had been invited to do some things in Africa because of his celebrity, and, didn't by his own admission, didn't know that much about what was really going on. And so him and Whitney, actually, who they'd been friends for a while, went and did a trip, and they went all across the region, all across sub-Saharan Africa. I think it was a total of like 8 or 9 trips or something like that. It's really getting down and seeing what was happening and trying to, they said, if he's going to use the commodity of his celebrity for something, he wanted to really know what it was for.
Yeah.
And it was at the time that the horrible genocide was taking place in Darfur. And so he'd gone to South Sudan, he'd gone to the border between Sudan and South Sudan, and where active fighting was in Darfur. But then he also went to Eastern Congo, where, there's, as of last week, there's something like 252 armed groups. They're still active. And really went there and talked to a wide variety of people. He talked to the UN, he talked to the local governments, he talked to local nonprofits, and just walked the streets and talked to people. And that's when he learned about the Great African War, which I mentioned earlier, for the first time. And that's when he really decided, okay, because of what I do for a job, I've got this, and because of the way the US culture is, there's this weird commodity around celebrity.
Yeah.
And when he says something or when he does something, people pay attention.
Yeah.
And so how can he use that to be a little bit of a mirror or a lens to shift that towards Congo and towards the solutions that really matter? And so, yeah, you mentioned that we work with a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and Ben and Whitney started partnering with him in 2009, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018. And it's because of the amazing work that Denis Mukwege is doing, Dr. Denis Mukwege, particularly on, so he works really on gender-based violence. So one of the most horrible things about that war that happened is that sexual violence became a weapon of war during that time. And he's really worked to confront that and to bring justice back to communities, as well as to heal them with medicine. And he's completely deserving of the award for that. But I think in some small part, very small part, the fact that Ben could bring attention to what Dr. Mukwege has done has helped facilitate that.
Yeah.
And that he is, a refracting lens that helps bring some focus to Eastern Congo that frankly wouldn't otherwise exist. Not many people think about Eastern Congo on a daily basis, but I see it now when I go to the grocery store. For some reason, people are thinking about Ben every day. it's weird, but he's saying, okay, how do I take that and put it towards a good, a worthwhile thing to call attention to?
Well, I mean, if his tabloid celebrity can somehow do good, isn't that a benefit? Isn't that great? And I feel like someone like him knows that if he can almost exploit his own celebrity and do good, what's wrong with that? I mean, nothing.
Oh no, and I think that's I think that's it. Is that particularly because the thing that's really impressive is that he doesn't make it about himself.
Yeah, wow, that is.
He really uses it to kind of uses it to amplify other people's voices, and so he's gone and testified before Congress and done things like that. But he's always really doing it alongside someone from Congo or someone that's on the, working there directly, which is admirable because it's not, it's also not about me.
Yeah.
I think that's the mistake that also, because anytime you run an organization, you also have all of these kind of challenges and things that you need to do to try and promote yourself because you need to market your organization. But at the end of the day, like the organizations that do this work are the least important part. The thing that really matters is that relationship between someone in Congo and someone that's usually across the world that cares enough about that person, even though they're never going to meet them, to give something up. Yeah. And I think that it's like you were talking about earlier, it's something that's sometimes been lost, as we've said. This is a problem that you can solve for a cup of coffee each day. You can't actually solve that for a cup of coffee each day. You can maybe give someone a meal for that cost.
Yeah.
But the thing that's an actual challenge, but is also the opportunity, is how do we recognize our shared humanity and celebrate it in a way that is empowering to one another?
Wow. That is a great sentiment. And I think a great kind of way to somewhat end this conversation. And I could talk about this for hours with you, because again, it's always fascinating, always interesting in hearing your stories and hearing the work you do. And it's amazing. And, you know, when I came up with this concept of this Decanted show, again, my idea was to talk to interesting people. And I really wanted to talk to a variety of interesting people, and, you know, and artists and writers and, you know, people in the sports industry and filmmakers. And you are brought a very, very unique angle to my show, and a very, very unique conversation that I cannot thank you enough. So the way I always like to end these shows is I always like to kind of leave people with sort of like some inspirational words, but I'm going to flip it a little bit here. So in all the challenges that you have in your career, and you know, you're trying to make the world a better place, and I'm sure there are times that it is frustrating, and you know, you're not able to accomplish everything you want to, and I'm sure there are times that you get, you know, downhearted, not being able to help everyone you want to help. But I know you wouldn't continue to do what you do if you didn't have the optimism and if you didn't have the hope. So instead of me leaving our viewers with some positive closure here, Ted, what gives you hope in all your challenges and everything you do and the people you work with and everything that you do for the world? What gives you hope for the future? But I know.
Wow, Mark, that's a geez. You don't even give. I've been talking too much. I haven't had the time to drink the wine to really
have one more good gulp of the Marcel Blue. Because, you know, I feel like you have to, you know, again, with all the challenges of what you do, if you don't have hope and you don't have optimism, and there isn't something that continues to motivate you, you couldn't possibly continue to do what you do. Yet you do. You continuously work and thrive to make the world a better place. So, you know, what gets you up in the morning, and what gives you hope, and what makes you think I can keep making the world a better place? There has to be something that gives you that hope.
Yeah, no. So there is, but I think it's, you know, to me, it's that has very little to do with me.
Ooh.
And in the way, meaning that like the impact that I will have is marginal. And I'm fortunate that I get to work. I don't mean that to be self-effacing or anything like that. Yeah. But I mean that really any of us, right? But it's the fact that any one of us can take small collective actions that actually then add up to a much larger thing. And particularly the more that we continue to empower and continue to look for solutions that include those people that are facing these problems themselves, then we'll have the biggest chance of success. And so when we stop looking at, you know, I've done a lot of work in the refugee space as well. And, you know, I think it was last year, I want to say the statistic was something like 123 million people that were displaced. And we've always looked at that as being a problem. right? But how do we actually flip that to start to saying, oh, we actually have 123 million people that think about this every single day. And as soon as we can start to harness that power, then that's what or the fact that we can harness that power makes me optimistic. And as soon as we do actually start harnessing that power, then the solution will become pretty readily apparent.
That's powerful. And I'll tell you what gives me hope for the future is people like you who have the motivation to, I mean, with your education, your intelligence, your background, you could do anything, and you chose to do something that makes the world a better place. And that gives me hope for the future, to know that there are people like you that are dedicating your life and your career to trying to help people, to trying to make the world a better place. And it's very inspiring. Every time I talk to you, I get inspired. I get a little bit guilty because I make fermented grape juice for a living and you help people. But really,
trust me, you're helping all of us, Mark.
Well,
on the serious note, though, I think that it isn't an us or them, right? Because I work within the nonprofit sector, it's more apparent. But it's up to all of us to do this, and we can all do it. And actually, the more of us that do it, and not saying you have to quit your job and join a sector or anything like that, but change is completely possible. And I've seen it. And so to me, there's no one, whether you're making wine or whether you're selling stocks or whatever it is that people do, you can be making the world a better place by your actions. And it's just thinking about that and saying, okay, how am I going about whatever it is that I'm doing that's going to be treating people with respect and dignity, and thinking about the larger impact that you can make. And so I'm applauding you for it, but I'm also then telling you, you're not off the hook, right? It's not just the people that are want to move to Congo or move to Somalia or wherever, but it's up to us all.
Well, I think that's a great way to end this conversation. And, again, Decanted is all about opening up the conversation. We opened up an amazing conversation. Let's do one last cheers, and cheers to what you were just saying, the idea that all of us can make a difference. All of us in a small way can make the world a better place. Cheers to that, Tad. Cheers to, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview with me. So this has been another and a very deep and meaningful episode of Decanted. I encourage everyone that is watching this, like and subscribe. Check out ECI and all the amazing work they're doing. Read Tad's amazing interview in Forbes magazine. You can find that online. And definitely check out our next episode. It's going to be hard to top this one. This was a lot of fun here, Tad. Everyone at home, cheers. We can all make the world a better place. Tad told us so. All right. We'll see you next time, Tad. You have a good one now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers from Wine Country.